Welcome to Delenta Activate, the podcast that brings you insights and stories from executive coaches and changemakers in the leadership space. I'm your host, Dr. Nima Pasha from Delenta, and I'm excited to share with you the latest trends, best practices, and innovations in coaching and leadership development.
Well, so hello and welcome to a new episode of the Activate podcast. Today, I have with me the absolutely fabulous Amy Elizabeth Fox. And Amy, I've got to say, I love the fox in the background that I can see. Obviously, listeners are listening, so they will not know that there's a fox in the background, but still, you're the CEO of Mobius Executive Leadership. And I'd love to give you the space to introduce yourself in a few words in whichever way you want to be known to our listeners today. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Lise. It's so lovely to be with you. And thank you for your comment on the fox. It's one of several things I have in my home that were my parents, so they're doubly cherished for the lineage piece that they hold. Yes, as you said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mobius, and Mobius is a premier transformational leadership firm doing particularly immersive, deep vertical development with very senior executives. And my particular passion over the last 20 years of leading the company has been introducing trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive approaches to adult development and really trying to help organizations to unlock the full potential of their senior leaders by getting at the root causes of some of the derailers that teams struggle with, that organizational culture efforts struggle with, and that individual leaders struggle with. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that I very much believe spirituality is the gold mine under the conference table in many organizations, and that tapping into the dimension of the numinous or the liminal is an incredible resource for helping people to lead in complexity.
Gosh, so many keywords already, kind of trauma-informed, spirituality, lead in complexity. You spoke about immersive trainings and development. You spoke about depth. I wonder, in the current landscape, what is the reception that you're having, and do you find any need to adjust your language as you approach organizations?
Well, I think any of us who are trying to bring cutting edge practices, so Mobius does a lot of what we call next practices, mindfulness and meditation, somatics, expressive arts, time in nature, time in reflection, time in dialogue. Anybody who's trying to bring in sort of novel ways of learning that aren't just a business school with PowerPoint always has to have as one of their superpowers the ability to calibrate and reframe language to meet the client system where it is. So I don't think there's been ever a moment where you could necessarily be fully transparent, let's say, about all the profound things that happen in the program, because you can't really capture it in words in a way. But what you can do is evoke the impact for the business, the return on investment for a potential client, and you can share illustrative stories that always move their hearts because they're so poignant and so powerful. And I think in some ways this work is better. An invitation is more powerfully made by sharing stories than it is by sharing theoretical, leadership language or frameworks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, talking of stories, what would be one or two stories that you would share that would help the listeners understand a bit better what it is that you do?
Mm. Maybe I'll just share a couple of illustrative exercises. So it's worth saying that, there's obviously a continuum of depth in any transformational pedagogy or orientation. So not every program aspires to be a deep therapeutic intervention in someone's life. So we at Mobius color code our programs green, yellow, red as a quick, easy nomenclature to signal to our faculty and to our clients and to help the client calibrate with us what level of depth makes sense to excavate and explore. So most of our programs are yellow programs, which are chances for executives to do deep self-examination, to share in a more vulnerable and disclosing way than everyday work life typically affords, and to unplug from the level of saturated information and frantic pace that everyone's moving at, to slow down and really ask the deeper questions of their lives about their purpose and their dreams and their heart. And that's beautiful. But about 10 times a year, I have the privilege, as does my sister, Erica Ariel Fox, who's my co-founder, to guide senior leaders from all over the world in a RED program, which is a 5-day residential immersive experience. Erica has created a whole methodology called Journey Work, in which she creates bespoke individual interventions for each participant in her program and uses the community of executives as a container for safety and for holding and for repair. It's very, very profound and beautiful. In my program, I'm using her methodology, which is called Winning from Within, that she created over many years in her teaching at Harvard Law School, where she's a longtime lecturer. I'm using the Jungian archetypes in her model as ways to activate dormant capabilities within leaders. So her model has 4 central archetypes, Lise. One is the dreamer, which is the dimension of us that has a vision, that has imagination, that holds creativity. The emotional gateway for the dreamer is joy. And I would argue that most of our organizations have a lot of suppressed joy and suppressed innovation capacity because they don't take space for play and whimsy and co-creativity. The second of the archetypes is the lover, where we spend a lot of time. The lover is, of course, how a leader creates psychological safety on a team, helps people to collaborate, creates real inclusion, creates climates of mutuality and generosity within the company. And in my boldest moment, I would say we're starved for love in most organizations, and that a program like this helps a leader to unlock their heart more fully so that they can go back and lead in such a way to foster that level of care and commitment among the people they lead. The third archetype is the warrior, which is about speaking hard truths. Many, many organizations struggle to have candid conversations skillfully, to use conflict as what Linda Hill at Harvard Business School calls creative abrasion for refining your ideas and learning from each other. And we wind up with silos and gossip and conversations at the water cooler, which is very corrosive to the level of safety and trust and openness with which people work together. And the warrior is also about work-life balance and trying to help people to work in a way that acknowledges that their body has limits, that their mind hits a wall at a certain point, and that being constantly in a doing and an exertion and an overgiving mode comes at a great cost. And I sometimes think if we did nothing in our leadership programs except give people white space to rest and to think, we would have already given them a lot of value. And the fourth of Erica's archetypes is the thinker. And you talked about leading in complexity. In the complexity we now find ourselves in, and in the ambiguity that we constantly find ourselves in, helping people to have the ability to separate the signal from the noise and to look at a complex picture and know what to zone in on, and to be able to pay attention at the margins of the system for incoming early warning signals or early opportunities. All of that cognitive agility, cognitive flexibility, and cognitive precision of discernment is what it means to be a centered thinker in current business. So all of the modules are really designed to activate those central dimensions of transformational capability. Erica's 4 archetypes also map one-to-one with the 4 quadrants of the brain. So these are intrinsic intelligences that we all have, but because of our life experiences, over time, some of them become dormant and underutilized, and we become identified with a subset of the archetypes. And so part of what we're trying to help people do is own their entire repertoire of possibility. And you do that through exploring people's life stories. You do that through looking at moments where they're getting triggered and reactive, and what are the underlying fears that are at play in day-to-day work that cause us to be dysfunctional and difficult with one another, cause us to be reactive, cause us to shut down, cause us to disengage. So it's psychological work in one sense. That's what I think is in part meant by vertical development, that we give people a chance to really reflect on what's going on internally. And Erica's model is a beautiful gift because everyone knows you're supposed to foster self-awareness, but very little theory in leadership development has told us what self to pay attention to. So the cartography of the archetypes give you both the self-observation capacity and much more choice and much more range.
Yes, and that's the range we need to thrive in complexity. Understanding that a lot of the situations we face are actually not either or, but both and to look at, oh, how might some of the thinking limit us in the creativity? You mentioned the joy in one of the first, or in the love that we can give, you mentioned that, or in the difficult conversations that we can kind of start having. You mentioned that, and interestingly, your voice started being slightly constricted for a small moment when you started talking about the warrior archetype. So I thought, oh, that's the warrior showing himself. Like this probably is something that is difficult for people these days. I wonder, it's a lot, right? Even though it's neatly four quadrants, four areas of the brain. You mentioned the individual level. Now, obviously, there's the systemic level as well. So it's beautiful to bring them together as a group because you get that experience. How do you accompany leaders in, after that red experience, to come back into the workplace and be able to have that, I think groundedness, to activate it on a daily basis going forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about how to sustain a catalytic moment such as a RED program. I think the first thing to say is that because the session itself is not giving people new ideas, but changing something foundational in their way of being. In some sense, you're not at any risk of recidivism because people have integrated meaningful memories, sensations, and emotions that have walked with them for a long time and unconsciously captured a lot of their operating system. So you could almost use it, a metaphor, to say you've opened up free RAM for fresh wind and the future to start to download in them. And I get letters all the time from people who took the program 10 years ago, 15 years ago, still pointing to it as a moment in time where their life changed and their way of being shifted in a very foundational and touching way. Just last week, I had two conversations with two executives that took the program a year ago, and each of them was telling me not only how it impacted the way that they lead their organizations, but the way that they are a spouse and the way that they are a parent and how they feel themselves, which is people leave with much more ability to have emotional self-contact and to feel their feelings, which is very beautiful. And of course, like any change process, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And on the last day of the program, I always encourage people to be very gentle and compassionate with themselves when the earlier habits, rear their head because it's inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. And my friend and teacher Thomas Hubel says something I really love that you're pointing to, which is the first test of any real change process is your willingness and your ability to make the shift. But the second test, which is even harder, is your ability to stay loyal and fidelitous to that shift in the face of signals from your system to change back.
Yeah.
So of course, sometimes leaders go back and people are embrace and rejoice in their shifts because they've been waiting for a long time to feel their authenticity or to get to know them better or to feel cared about by them. It's an obvious virtuous cycle of collective engagement. But some of the time, it's people in their immediate ecosystem are very nervous because they're showing up in new ways. They don't know quite how to relate to them. They don't know quite what to expect from them. And they will send very loud messages that says, can we have the old you back because we knew how to deal with that person? And so I think it's a matter of courage, and the peer support among the cohorts is critical in that reentry phase because you need people to walk beside you and to be allies of the shifts and to encourage your opening and to help you think about practical micro behavioral changes that you can make in daily life that reinforce your new aspirations and your new intentions and your new way of walking. So we often do very systematic cohering of small groups during the program that sustain for the 6 months after the program. We, of course, make ourselves available if somebody needs coaching or further support in whatever's unwinding for them. And all of that, I think, is vital for making it not just, as you said, an individual journey, but a journey that has ripple effects out into the organization.
Beautiful. And you mentioned your sister, you mentioned Thomas Hübel. Now, you talking of ripple effects reminds me of Jane Goodall, who once was challenged by, I think, by a journalist who said, oh, what you're doing is just the drop in the ocean. And she kind of responded something along the lines of, well, the ocean is made of drops. And I like that shift, because yeah, when you look at it, that's it. The ocean is made of drops.
Yeah, it's beautiful what she said. And I would add another thought, which is when we're thinking in linear terms, it feels like you're only touching a few people at a time. But when you think about those people being part of larger systems or fields of experience and the quality of their transmission and the way that they're leading shifting, that one person has an enormous influence over the culture of the organizations at which they are a part. And I have the privilege of working with the senior leaders, with top teams and CEOs and board chairs and members of boards. And those people really can change the values of an organization, the purpose of an organization, the boundaries of that organization, the sense of mission of that organization, and the qualities that they embody as a leader are what everyone is looking to role model off of what's permissible here, what's blessed here, what ways of bringing myself forward is tolerated here. So I absolutely believe that it happens in exponential ways. And I think that exponential wave can actually happen from anywhere in the organization. If a small community of practice inside of a company situated anywhere in the hierarchy of that company decide to do it differently and support each other to do that, I really believe that can have a massive disproportionate effect, not a one-to-one effect.
I was reading a book yesterday that shared a story, and as the kind of bottom line was never underestimate the effect that you can have on others. And you shared earlier on how those programs impact not only the leaders in their leadership in the organizations, but they change the way they relate, and so relating, I mean, we relate with the shopkeeper when we buy milk or bread, we relate with our partners, we relate with our children if we have some, like we relate with our friends, with our neighbors. So the ripple effects are actually going beyond organizations, but essentially to every person or entity that individual person is touching.
I love what you said, and reminds me of another thing Thomas said to me early in our relationship. He said, "It doesn't take time to love someone." And it was such a radical thought because we think that, oh, you have to unfold a relationship and deepen it over time and slowly, begrudgingly grant someone your trust and grant someone your investment in their well-being, and that it's a matter of time. But if you walk with a radically open heart, it's instantaneous. The recognition of the
Exactly.
humanity of the other, the beauty of the other, the joy of the encounter with the other can happen, as you said, in every possible interaction and timelessly.
Yeah, no, that's
And
beautiful.
that's how we rewire a world of love, I believe. Yeah.
It does remind me of a model I launched for my business where I have love in the acronym. So it's observe, love, act, and iterate. So it's not the nicest of acronym, Ola X, but still. And I fought for the L. So everyone was telling me, oh, Lise, this is so cheesy. No one will buy this. No one, remove love. And I was like, no, 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 no. Love has to stay at the center. And as you say, it's effortless. It's effortless once we embrace it. I'm
And I just want to
curious.
say
Oh,
something.
please go ahead.
The caution of cheesiness is an important one, Lise, for those of us that are trying to introduce this
Yeah,
kind of language into organizations, because the hallmark, shallow, superficial version of love in the workplace will get organ rejected, and it should, because it actually is cheesy. Real love in the workplace means I can hear the story of your life and the pain that you've walked. I'm interested to know how you see things differently than me and why. I want to repair our relationship when we're in breakdown. I'm willing to stay in the heat of a hot conversation because I'm invested in our collaboration and our capacity to do something together. So one of the skills that I'm trying to impart in these programs is the resilience or the strength or the commitment to rigorous love.
yeah. And I like the word commitment. It's what I think you were trying to say also with a real love. It's not like, yeah, let's pretend, but actually I hate this person and I want to be, promoted faster than them. No, and that's not going to work, obviously.
Yeah,
It's
and
about this fully committed.
to give a vivid and very painful example that's very current right now, you have many organizations that became part of the DEI movement,
Mm,
and they did very superficial training in unconscious bias, and they didn't ask people to really do profound racial healing and collective trauma
yeah,
healing. And the minute the zeitgeist shifts, the commitment to that imperative dissolves because nobody actually did the painful repair and restorative work of racial healing. Had we done that, it wouldn't matter what was happening in the public culture. Our commitment to that walk would be ongoing. And so
and
you
yes,
go
and I
ahead.
think that's the core of the transformative work, because when you do that, something in you internally shifts and transforms, and you cannot unsee what you've seen. There's
Exactly.
right. Hmm.
Exactly. That's beautiful. You can't unsee what you've seen. And that's why, in some way, I never worry about the post program embedding because you can't unsee what you've seen.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
beautiful what you see.
Amy, I know we're kind of slowly but surely reaching the end of our conversation. As you know, on our podcast, we have a mix of leaders, executives, and we've certainly talked a lot about what you do for them. We also have some business owners who literally are in our space, delivering coaching, delivering transformational programs, serving clients, rejoicing in the changes that they see on the way. I wonder if you were to share any advice or if there was anything that you wish you would have known when you started in that field, what would it be?
I mean, my biggest advice is walk with a community. It's very difficult to start a business on your own, to hold a vision ahead of when the world can hear you, to stay true to your values, to have the, I don't know, stamina to keep pouring out your effort and pouring out your devotion to your vision, and even when it's hard. And I feel so grateful that I had beautiful teachers that supported me to stand in my full power and to stand at the frontier of my field. I had healers who gave me refuge in the pause moments to restore my body and my heart. And I had a gorgeous global community of practitioners to learn with and to heal with and to collaborate with. And I know that I could not have done it. Certainly, of course, without my sister, but also without all
Mm,
of those other beautiful friends and
mm,
companions. And I think we put such a strong emphasis in our culture on individual capacity and individual resilience. And I think it's distorted. I think we should be encouraging people to live lives of vast interdependency and lifting up the reality that it does take a village and extending ourselves generously to one another's enterprises. And I think the second thing I would say, Lise, is it's a moment when we have to break down the boundaries of organizational self-interest and look to our, traditional competitors as collaborators, as allies, and learn together and share best practice and support each other in the market. And I know that I've had the great privilege of creating a kind of ecosystem or a consortium of practice within Mobius with large firms globally and boutique firms and joining together when we each had expertise that was relevant to a client need and regularly learning together through Mobius's Next Practice Institute, which welcomes people from all different organizations to its programs. And I really encourage people to be innovative in that particular way because it's a kind of commercial love that I think is critical now.
And I had this picture of, you mentioned ecosystem, you mentioned interdependencies. I read a book called The Mother Tree, which essentially talks about the interconnectedness of trees across species with fungi kind of, well, linking the roots together. And that was beautiful. And as I was reading this book, I thought there's so much wisdom that we humans somehow don't quite get at times. And there would be so much more richness and resilience for us as human societies if only we would learn and adapt some of what we see the trees doing in the forest.
100% correct. And I had the privilege over the last 40 years of studying the field of eco-psychology, which is
Beautiful.
exactly as you're pointing to, looking to the wisdom of nature and the ecological intelligent design for principles of what it means to thrive. And as we apply those to living human systems, we move organizations, I think, from being disembodied, exhausted, absent of the heart and absent of the spirit to being ecologically informed living systems. And I believe that shift is this moment in time is when we need that shift to happen in every dimension, including heightening people's ecological sensitivity and care.
Mhm. So, what are your current projects right now these days?
Well, I've just finished teaching with Thomas a year-long program for coaches and facilitators in trauma-informed leadership development. And we are in the process of creating a global network of practitioners that want to volunteer to work with various executives who are in high distress as people get furloughed from the US government. So yesterday we had a wonderful call with 200 coaches who are going to step in to support people in USAID that are losing their livelihoods and losing their life's work. So if anybody's listening and would like to become involved in that volunteer effort, I welcome you to write me at amy@mobiusleadership.com. We're going to need more and more people who are willing to give a little bit of their time to be part of a societal safety net and refuge. And I would welcome their outreach. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely point quite a few people to you for that. Is there anything else that you would want our listeners to know in terms of, what's next, anything that they can reach out to you on?
Well, if anyone would like to talk about our leadership programs, our coaching work, our executive retreats, of course, I'd be utterly delighted to talk about how this kind of deeper chord of real vertical development can come into your organization. And we will shortly be announcing the registration for our annual gathering of the Next Practice Institute, which will take place in Cape Cod next October 2025. It's a week of immersive learning tracks, thought leadership, expressive arts, global community, great celebration, and we'd love to have you with us, of course. Thank you for asking,
Beautiful.
Lise. Yeah.
Of course. My last question is literally, is there anything I should have asked you and haven't? And if yes, what is it? And feel free to answer it.
Well, I found it a gorgeous conversation, so there's no question sort of top of mind, but maybe I would just say, since we're speaking together at a moment of a lot of societal churn and distress, reach out and hold each other. You know, don't underestimate what it means to make an act of kindness, an act of gratitude to somebody who's supporting you, an act of just interest in somebody's day. We need those daily tendernesses now more than ever. And yeah, I feel very called to that. And I'm happy you asked me so I could say that.
Yeah. And I feel tenderness coming up in me as you share that. And it reminds me of a call I just had last week with a CEO of a company where essentially we were holding space for grief and for the uncertainty that a lot of people face these days. And what was important was what we practitioners call normalizing. And I shared with her, she's not the only one. I'm having a lot of conversations like these days. And simply hearing that and knowing that I'm not alone was incredibly helpful already.
Yeah,
So
that's beautiful, Lise. And
thanks for bringing this up.
there's something implicit in your story that I want to make explicit, which is to give yourself license to reach out to the leader you're coaching as a human being with a heart that's hurting and not just as a figurehead in the top of a pyramid. They're longing for people who can hear their hearts and their grief and their confusion. And when you can offer that harbor, it's really meaningful.
Mm. Well, Amy, on that picture of harbor, us as harbors for hearts that are longing for a bit of a safe space and protection for growth.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, yeah, let me thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful conversation. I know last time we talked, we got through also started straight away. So I'm very sure there'll be many more of such conversations to come. Thank you for joining us today.
Such a
And
pleasure.
we'll share your details for everyone else who wants to reach out to you directly.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Powered by Delenta, your all-in-one coaching platform.